What did Chinese characters look like before the seal characters? Here we have the Shizhou Li Gui with bronze characters. The gui was used to hold food for ritual occasions. Li is the name of the owner. There are 33 characters. It is an example of characters from 3,000 years ago. Actually, the Zhou dynasty ended in 255 BC, but seal characters were not standardized until 221 BC. From the beginning of the Zhou dynasty to the Qing Shi Huang unification, people would have written on bamboo strips. But because of the Qing Shi Huang destruction of books and 3,000 years of time, we have few examples from bamboo strips. What we have are several thousand cast bronze articles with inscriptions of major events. We have excavated many of these objects, and this is what we know about Zhou Chinese. We call these bronze characters, but we could just as well call them Zhou characters, because they cover most of the Zhou dynasty. Shu Shen describes a type of characters called greater seal characters. These were the type of characters that were supposed to be used during the Zhou dynasty. They are often quite different from the real examples that we find on bronze characters. The peculiarities of bronze characters are: number one, the comparatively primitive bronze casting technology of that time means that we cannot depend on the characters to be as accurate as if they were written on bamboo. They have casting flaws. Number two, they have undergone 2,000 to 3,000 years of corrosion, which further deteriorates their condition. Number three, some of these objects were excavated recently, and thus we can depend on their authenticity. Others have been around for hundreds of years and may be forgeries. The making of forgeries was particularly prominent during the Tang Dynasty, 600 AD to 900 AD. Number four, the inscriptions range from single characters on coins to several hundred characters on some large bronze objects. One of the main references is the Jingwen Bian, with 24,223 different sample characters in all, representing about 4,000 different characters. Most recently, we have the Xin Jingwen Bian. Number five, since these inscriptions mainly commemorate important events, we may not find some of the everyday characters that were used at that time. Number six, these few artifacts range all over China and over a 1,000-year period. This is good in that it gives us a large range of samples, but limited in that we cannot get an intensive sample of any one place or time. The Shang dynasty came before the Zhou, and the few characters from this era come mainly from oracle bone characters, characters carved on bone and turtle shells. This is an example of some divinations concerning the winds which blow from the four directions. Oracle bones were only discovered in 1895. When we say oracle bones, we mean either the front plates, plastrons of turtle shells, or the shoulder bones, scapula of oxen. The people of the Shang dynasty would scratch inscriptions on the bone or shell with a sharp object, and then see how the bone or shell cracked when exposed to fire. In this way, they would attempt to cast fortunes. The uneducated Chinese of the 19th century who first found these bones thought they were dragon bones and ground them up for traditional medicine. The writing was obviously not readable to them. We have been studying them and trying to put them together now for 100 years. We can understand somewhat over half of the character samples, which means we can understand about 95% of the text. Peculiarities of oracle characters are Number 1. Almost all of the oracle bone and turtle plastrons all come from one excavation site. If it were not for this one site, we would have no direct proof that the Shang Dynasty Chinese were really literate. The shells and bones cover a period of about 500 years, from about 1500 BC to about 1000 BC. The advantage of this is that we have a small number of writers, all from one place and extending over a relatively long period of time. This gives us a kind of average, and we can at least talk about how the people of that time and place wrote. Number 2, the pieces are a real mess. By some estimates, they total 400,000 pieces. Several thousand plastrons and bones have been reconstructed, and several tens of thousands of sentences have been studied. I have compiled a database of 31,876 sample characters that represent about 4,000 different characters, of which we think we understand about 1,500, of which we think we understand somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 of these characters. From the analysis of characters like dian, which means dictionary, we believe that the usual writing medium for that time was bamboo strips. The first actual examples of bamboo strips we have date back to about 400 BC. So by that time, we already have almost 1,000 years of Chinese for which we have no proof that the writing existed, because there is not one single bamboo strip. Number 4, the characters of 1500 BC have already undergone a high degree of abstraction. When we are told what they represent and how they are supposed to be interpreted, it seems in most cases fairly obvious. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, it is not obvious to the casual observer what most of the characters represent. This is an indication that the writing system had already been around for a long time, hundreds of years and perhaps thousands of years. Number 4, the purpose of the oracle bones was to cast fortunes. There was a lot of writing done here, but it is like the vocabulary that you might find in a horoscope. We can assume that they probably had many characters for more everyday common things that never appeared on the oracle bones. We might be able to extract 5,000 characters from the oracle bones, but there were probably twice that many in use at the time. Changjie is the name of a person, possibly mythical, possibly real, who is credited with inventing Chinese characters. It is believed that spoken language developed a little at a time. A language with 10 words is more useful than a language with no words. 100 words are better, and so on. With written language, on the other hand, a written system that cannot represent at least the majority of spoken language is virtually useless. Imagine a written system that can only represent half of the concepts that you can talk about. Why bother to learn it? The traditional story says that a man named Changjie invented the writing system around 3000 BC. You can only say so much with paintings and tokens. I think that an innovative artist found that he might represent words with basic symbols and phonetic parts. He, and probably a group of people, were commissioned to invent and learn the writing system for practical purposes. In short, I think Changjie was probably a real person.